Are you wondering whether or not investing in new development properties is the right move for you? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today when we break down the pros and cons of investing in new development real estate.
Welcome back to another episode of Property Venture Podcast, a show dedicated to offering educational information to our listeners, no matter where you are in your real estate investment journey. I'm Anthony Lodja, here with Giancarlo Carangelo.
Yes.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's dive into it. I mean, this is a really interesting subject, and a lot of people have been asking us this, if whether or not it's worth it to invest in new development.
Yeah, we get asked this all the time.
All the time.
Right? It's like you're starting with whether it's a new investor or whether it's someone who wants to buy for themselves. They're always saying to them, they're always asking us, like, should we buy new? Should we go pre-used?
Yeah. Right. And a lot of people don't necessarily know the pros and cons when it comes to investing in new development, and there's a lot of pros, but there's also definitely some cons, and I think that when it comes to investing in properties, everyone has to find their niche. Everyone knows their groove and their style. And for some people, new development is definitely their style. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. And for all our listeners listening out there, like, follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening us to, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, for more information like these topics that we discuss on a weekly basis. So, where should we begin?
Well, I think something that's on everyone's mind right now in Canada are the fact that we have a 30-year amortization mortgage. Yeah. Right? As of August 1st, the Canadian government has allowed this for new construction.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the place to start, right? Because now you're giving the opportunity to investors, young and old, the opportunity to buy a property with a lower monthly payment because you've increased the amortization period from 25 years to 30 years. While that's not too good on the, you're yourself paying interest. However, when you're an investor, we know that the interest portion of it gets deducted anyways on your taxes.
Yeah, I mean, and there's like I've invested in a new development condo myself. There's definitely pros, there's definitely cons. Yeah. We're going to dive a little bit into that. But I would say, like, on top of the 30-year mortgage, a huge pro when it comes to investing in new development is it's a new development. So what does that mean? Whether you're investing in, condos or townhouses as a new development, you're getting a new product directly from the manufacturer, not owned by anybody. You are the first owner. And this means that you have a new unit, fresh materials.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
This means that you could basically maximize the rental value, because a huge pro, especially here in Quebec, where we are a province that, like Ontario and other provinces, have rent control and a landlord-tenant board. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but when you purchase a new development property, for the first 5 years of that property's lifespan, it's exempt from any rent control or tenant board laws.
Huge advantage, right?
Huge. So, like, what does this mean? This means that, like in Quebec, they like to tell you how much you can raise your rent every year.
And there's 2, 3, 4%.
2 to 4. Sometimes we've seen 5. Well, let's just say, for example, you're taking a $1,500 property here, and if it's not new, you could only raise it 5%. A new development is exempt from that. So what does that mean? So let's just say in the next year or two, the property values in the area have increased, not 2, 3, 4, 5%, but they've increased 20%. You're allowed to go back to your tenant and raise the rental price to the market value. Yeah.
It's a game changer.
Put it in simple terms, like, for example, if on a $1,500 unit, you're only allowed, as per the tribunal laws, to raise it $50 a month, well, for new development that's exempt from that, you could actually raise the unit $100 a month, and that's a huge game changer.
Absolutely.
Right? So for the first 5 years, you could raise it whatever you like. And the best part about it, unlike retail, is if the tenants refuse your increase, well, in new development property, they got to leave. They cannot refuse and stay. They need to leave. So that's a huge pro.
Absolutely.
Huge pro when it comes to maximizing value.
Yeah. Another huge pro is the fact that, well, you've alluded to it, it's brand spanking new.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You get a 5-year warranty.
Yeah. 5-year builder warranty is something that people do not know much about. So for the first 5 years, whatever defect goes wrong into the property, that's covered under the builder's warranty. So that's supposed to be repaired for free.
Yeah. And there are certain strategies that, we've also seen that people, year 4, begin to do an inspection on their property. They start to find little...
4.5.
Or year 4.5. They start finding little kinks that are wrong with the property. And then they go back to the builder in order to have them fixed.
Yeah.
They're within their period. They're allowed to do that.
Because when you purchase a new development property, like especially for example, townhouses, there's some settlements, right? So like the property needs to find its footing, for lack of a better term, and it needs to settle into its foundation. And you might see a little bit of shift and, even just the doors or something like that, as simple like that. Well, you're going to see those within the first 4 years.
Absolutely.
So when it's 4.5 years in, you could get it inspected and all the deficiencies get rectified by the developer, covered under the warranty. And that's huge.
It's huge.
I like that, And if you're purchasing a newly developed townhouse, let's say, or duplex, well, a huge pro is for the first 10 years, there's no major repairs that's needed.
Zero.
Unless it falls under a construction defect.
Yeah.
Right? In which case you would be covered and have legal recourse against the developer. But you're not worrying about changing the roof.
No.
You're not worrying about changing the faucets. You're not worrying about any of that.
The plumbing, electricity, everything is A1.
Everything, and there's low maintenance costs because it's new. So for the first 5-6 years, you're going to be seeing less maintenance costs, which is a huge advantage. Definitely a huge advantage.
And another advantage that I think people don't recognize is sometimes these builders have really attractive financing.
Yeah.
Right? They'll finance you for below, right? What's out there.
Yeah.
It's not always the case. Sometimes they'll stifle you, but this is something we'll speak about a bit later.
Well, they have flexible down payment options, right? So for example, a property that we've purchased with a 20% down payment, only 5% was needed at the initial signature of the contract, but then the other 15% was scattered upon the remaining time for delivery date. So in this case, the delivery date was, let's say, 3 years, which is 36 months, while the other 15% was required within 30 months. So it makes it a lot easier for investors not to pull out that cash and put that cash down all one shot right away. It allows you a flexible down payment option.
Yeah.
And another thing that is really advantageous for new development properties is oftentimes the city will offer a credit or a reimbursement. So for 5%, usually, sometimes we see it as very common to see 5%. So you get 5% back from the city. It's a special program. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with the developers. You need to verify with the city that you're investing in, but they have a lot of these incentives, which make it attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get into maybe the potential downsides.
Oh, just like everything, there's had a downside for sure. So
yeah, I think the most glaring one is obviously you look at a new construction and it's cost more.
Yeah. You're paying more of a premium for the product because it's new. Yes. Because it's new. But that balances out in the repairs that you're not going to be doing in the first 10 years, right?
Exactly.
So that's a con in a sense, but it also ties into a pro.
Yeah.
Because you will pay, let's say, a 5% premium, 10% premium on the product, but for the first 10 years, you shouldn't have any major repairs to do or maintenance, right? Apart from whatever you're buying, regular maintenance. Let's say if you're buying a townhouse, the grass, snow, but oftentimes townhouses are built in like a condominium-like community where the snow and the grass removal is included for all the owners, right? So you do have to pay a condo fee, which can be a con to purchasing new developments and condos. You do have to pay a condo fee, but you don't necessarily have to worry about the lawn or the snow being removed.
Yeah.
That's a con. Definitely.
Also a big one that you've seen, it's more than most, I think, is delays in construction.
I have a funny story about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk later.
We should talk
about it right now. On my own personal experience, I have a funny story about that. But there's always delays in construction. Always. Okay. Whatever the time limit is, take it with a grain of salt. Developers will often say that it's going to be delivered in 2 years, and next thing you know, it's delivered in 4. And then Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, they overpromise, underdeliver. It's so standard.
Which will lead me to my next con of purchasing real estate as a new development is these developers, their contracts are designed to fully protect them.
Yes.
And not even consider the protection of the buyer.
Yeah.
So what does this mean? Well, if there's delays, there's no penalty for the developer to pay or compensate the buyer. So if you're waiting to move into that property, and let's say you're leasing a unit now and you want to move in and start a family and you cancel your lease, you don't renew your lease, and next thing you know, the property that's supposed to be delivered for X date's delayed for another 6-7 months. You got to scramble, find a place to live temporarily, and that's a con.
Yep.
You know, and there's no protection for a buyer.
There's also no protection if, we'll say, the cost of goods go up.
Yeah.
The contractor will come back to you and they will say, hey, unfortunately, your condo, your townhouse, your triplex, your fourplex, it's going to cost more money and you have no choice but to accept it or you forfeit it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you're forfeiting your down payment as well. Which
is another huge con. And we've seen this a lot, you know, in the COVID market, right? Which it'll all make sense when I say about my personal experience. But what we see this a lot in the COVID market is that, you know, interest rates went up. Delivery of the product got delayed because of shutdowns, because of this, because of that. Next thing you know, a product that was supposed to be delivered in 2 years is delivered in 4 years. But at that time, the bank that approved you for the product at a certain interest rate needs to reevaluate the file. So that means they need to reapprove you for a file. Now, you're not going to be paying the same interest rate that you were qualified for in the first place. So now you're paying a higher interest rate. And you might have to requalify again. And if you cannot requalify for that mortgage, you need to do one of two things. Find a way to assign that sale to another buyer to recuperate your down payment.
Exactly.
Or find a way to qualify for that mortgage.
Yeah, which is often meaning put more down payment.
Yeah. Or find a co-signer.
Or find a co-signer.
You know, or something. But this is a huge con. And this happened to a lot of people in the last 4 years. I'd say with the COVID frenzy there, it basically...
It's one of those weird things where if the contractor does not offer you or the builder doesn't offer you a fixed interest rate, sometimes we say, oh, that's great because we could go into the market and find a market rate and negotiate with the various banks, right? We're not stuck with that contractor and their rate. But at the same time, if there are huge delays and interest rates go up, well, you're on the hook for it.
Yeah, you're on the hook for it. And you need to find a way to, you know, I've heard stories about people in Toronto and Montreal and everywhere basically just losing their down payment.
Oh, yeah.
Some people had to forfeit $120,000 down payment. And I don't know about you guys, but $120,000, I'd rather not forfeit it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I'd rather.
Absolutely. Also, like when buying a condo brand new, you just don't know how it's going to turn out. No. Like you could see the specs, you could see all the nice pictures, but you just don't really know how it's going to turn out. What's the finished product?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like purchasing a plot of land and, you know, developing that land, building a triplex, fourplex, which is something we've done already. It's completely different.
You're purchasing a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You're purchasing a plan on paper. So you don't know the final product. Again, it's not for everybody to invest in new development real estate, but it does have its perks and it does have its downsides as well. So if you're comfortable purchasing a plan, which will lead me to my next con that we just thought of, the plan that you are purchasing, let's say, for example, is a 1,000 square foot unit. That's gross.
Yeah.
That's gross. And that means that it's subject to lose up to 10% of its square footage upon finishings.
Yeah. What does that mean? Gross square footage is simply saying, okay, what is the area of your condo, of your plex, of your home? It doesn't include for the walls. It doesn't include for the plumbing. It doesn't include for anything in the way.
Countertops,
the island, the kitchen cabinets, nothing.
Yeah.
So the net square foot is typically what we see on the market. But in these construction projects, they only offer you the gross square footage.
Yeah. And again, their contracts fully protect them. So you can't even go back and say, hey, I purchased a plan at, let's say, 500 square feet. And now when it was delivered, it was 445. Because it's in the contract. There's a clause in the contract that stipulates that you might be subject to a 10% loss of square footage upon delivery. unfortunately.
Read the fine print.
Read the fine print, guys. Always read the fine print. And another con that people don't necessarily look at is the resale value. It's uncertain. Typically when you buy a new development, you gain 10% equity upon construction. Once the property is fully constructed, you gain that 10%. However, if we're looking at what happened in Toronto a couple of years ago, where they were building, and condos were selling, and rental values were high, and all of a sudden COVID hit and stopped all construction. They stopped building. There's cranes with half-built towers in the sky. Well, your projections are not accurate now, right? So your value of the condo in Toronto went down.
Yes.
Anywhere that this happens in any market goes down, right? So it's hard and it's uncertain to project your equity your gains.
Well, people often say to themselves, they say, well, look, I'm going to buy this new build. It's going to be delivered to me in 2 years. So that means I'll have 2 years of appreciation. Well, that's not always the case.
No.
That's not always the case because the price you're paying today is often not the market value. It's often an appreciated value.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and here's another one that this could be a pro or it could be a con, however you look at it, okay? But location and community development. So however you look at it, okay, this could be one or the other pros or con. Now, to me, it would be a pro because if you're buying in a new area where they're really going to develop a community, then chances are they're going to add services within that community, parks, parking lots, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Activities, I've seen some condo complexes where they built a whole community and the condo complex essentially had, a dog grooming place or a pet grooming place in sight, a pet park in sight for the owners of pets, right? And then I've seen some that had even banks and grocery stores in the condominium complex, right? So
I think we're seeing that more and more.
We're seeing that, yeah. Yeah. They call it community development, And we're definitely seeing a lot of more grocery stores at the bottom on the mixed-use commercial projects, definitely. So, which is convenient, guys, right? Go down the elevator and you could do all your groceries. I mean, it all depends on how you look at it, but some people might look at it as a con because they're purchasing in an underdeveloped area.
That's it.
For example, in Montreal, there was an area called Griffintown. 10 years ago, it was all industrial. It was all factory.
Yeah.
Now it's the trendiest part of Montreal.
I remember 2 bedrooms. A 2-bedroom condo there would sell for what? $250, $260?
Yeah, max.
No?
Yeah, 600.
Yeah.
600,000. Yeah. So community development and location, pro or con, however you want to look at it, but this is something to keep in mind as well. Right?
Yeah. Now let's talk about some key considerations, for investors. There's obviously cash flow concerns, or there could be cash flow concerns. Because even though you're paying or you're getting a higher rent, what often happens is you're also paying a lot more money for the property.
Yeah.
So this is why sometimes in the resale market, in the used, property market, you're seeing a lot better return on equity versus new builds. The place where new builds really, I should say, thrive are in years 3, 4, 5, because in those years, right, you're not increasing the rent like we just spoke about before. When you're not increasing the rent 2, 3, 4, 5%, you could be increasing the rent 10%, 15% to reflect for the changes in the market.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And another thing to tie into cash flow concerns, and it might even also be a con, is larger down payments.
Yes.
Right? Typically speaking, you have to pay 20% down on a new development. And let's say you're buying a $500,000 new development.
Yeah.
20% down is a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
And you need to pay that within the 30 months or whatever it's stipulated.
Yeah.
Right. So with that being said, let me talk about my personal experience about purchasing new development. So I was always a multifamily guy. Plexes, those were my thing. But I decided to purchase and invest in a new development condo. Now, at the time, I was working for a local developer as a rental representative. And I was looking at 2 locations. I was looking at a location where they were building a condo complex, and I was looking at another location 2 blocks down where a competitor was building a condo complex. At first, I wanted to go to the competitor because I liked the product, I liked the plans, and it was a very reputable competitor, very, very known company. And then, of course, there's a loyal part to me where I'm a big team player, and I decided not to purchase that property because I worked for the local developer in the area, so I decided to purchase their product.
Good.
So I purchased their product because I do, and I still do, like the location better than the original condo that I was looking at. But this was around the time of COVID, and it was just one hurdle and one obstacle after the other. So when I made a decision to purchase off of the developer that I was working with, you know, originally they were supposed to deliver the condo in 2 years, originally.
What I love is all the negatives we've stated, he's going to mention.
Happened to me.
So the chances of all of them happening at once is quite low. They do happen, right?
They do.
But this is truly a prime example.
Yeah. So originally the property was supposed to be built in 2 years. Construction ended up getting delayed for about a year and a half after that. So it was supposed to be delivered in 2022, and it only got delivered December 2023. So let's call it January 2024. It only got delivered then. During that time, of course, COVID, interest rates spiked. Now, all of a sudden, I was approved, not pre-approved, approved for a mortgage on that property at an interest rate of 2.69. By the time I faced multiple rate increases, by the time it was said and done to actually purchase my condo, that interest rate was now 4.71, which makes a huge difference on cash flow and ties into the cash flow concerns.
Guys, we're investors in the end, right?
Yeah.
Interest rates matter, right? And this is just going to kill your cash flow.
Killed my cash flow. Totally.
Not to mention, you're getting a product delivered in January. January is not a great month to find a rent.
To anybody, exactly. And what happened here was now I had to requalify for the bank. So I'm a real estate broker, investor, property manager. And 2022 was one of the toughest years for sales-wise. Volume really dropped, high interest rates, nobody's buying, nobody's selling. It was one of the roughest years. And I had to jump through hurdles and work with a very creative mortgage specialist to help me push that file through in order to not sacrifice the $50,000 down payment. While this was happening, the developer who I worked with raised the cost of the condo $15,000 on me, no explanation. They just raised it $15,000, and unfortunately, you have no choice but to accept. Because remember, these contracts fully protect the developers and they don't protect the buyers. So which is important to read the fine print.
And also, like, something important to note is, you know, go with the best option. I understand you're loyal to the company you're with.
I'm a team player.
Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, you know, we're investors. Like, we're trying to make, right, the most money possible for our investors, for our investment.
I think the kicker of that is the original product that I was supposed to buy from the reputable developer, the larger developer, that I was not part of their team, ended up delivering 4 phases in 2 years. And the development that I did buy, which was a 3-phase development that was supposed to be delivered in 4 years, only barely delivered the first phase in 4 years. Only barely. So it's a little bit of my story. Would I invest in new development again? I won't say no, but I'll definitely say I'll do a lot more due diligence and make a carefully calculated decision with that. So some takeaways on this, guys, before we wrap it up. Do your due diligence. Really look at the pros and cons when it comes to investing in new development, because yes, there are a lot of pros, but there can be a lot of cons too.
Read the fine print.
Read the fine print, definitely.
Yeah.
Read the fine print and really make a careful, calculated investment decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that being said, guys, we're looking forward to seeing you on the next episode where we have a really special guest coming in to talk with us. And as usual, like, follow, subscribe wherever you're listening us to. My name is Giancarlo and Anthony.
I'm Anthony Lodja. Thank you, guys,
for tuning in, guys.